why do we need Dharmapala actually?
According to the conventional Mahayana Buddhism, then, if you make a mistake, you only really fall back about one step at a time. When you're using the methods of Vajrayana, if you even get distracted or overtired, or your mind ceases to be alert enough, it's possible you could slip and fall, and it could kill you, or it could, harm you like this. And spiritual practices like that too. Their job is to look after people who are on the path.
In Neva community, we call them Azima.
Ajima.
So is there a link between Dakini and
the Ajima is a particular type of Dakini. This kind of Dakini exists in very close connection with human beings as well as nature, with human society and also the natural hierarchy of nature, which includes animals and the landscape and the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. Right.
I heard that Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche also found one of the Termas, Vajrayana.
Yes, and sometimes treasures are taken literally out of thin air. They say out of space, sometimes out of water, sometimes out of earth. Prajnaparamita sutras were not taught openly. They were hidden in the realm of the Nagas at the time of the Buddha. People were not ready for these, didn't have direct need for them. Guru Rinpoche and his 25 disciples, they could come back at a later time, and at some point they would have an experience that would alert them, aha, I can retrieve some treasures from this spot.
The idea of Shambhala is very fascinating, first of all. So what is it this hidden spiritual kingdom, or how can we see Shambhala as?
For example, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he has said at different times and in different places, in response to this question, where is Shambhala? What is Shambhala? He has said, Shambhala is definitely a real place. It exists. He has said that it actually exists here on our planet. It's hidden from view. It's disguised. It's a crypto kingdom or crypto continent that exists on planet Earth, but we can't see it because magic has hidden it. If you're a Nepali or living around Kathmandu, go to visit some of the famous chaityas. Like Bodha or Kasti Mahachaicha is a very popular one for many tourists, but there are others too. There's Charamati at Chabil, and there's 3 other Ashoka era stupas in Lalitpur or Kathmandu, but I think at least 2 of them are in Lalitpur now. So these are very ancient places, and just to do one circle of these places in asking for guidance, asking for connection, would probably make it, it means that the person who does that with just a little bit of faith will probably find the answer to their question, how do I practice Buddhism? Or they will just stumble on the answer.
Naked Mindfulness with Rishab Kharel. Namaste and welcome back to Naked Mindfulness. I'm your host Rishab Kharel. This is a space where we explore wisdom, awareness, and the deeper teaching of mind, and also the lived experience. Today we go a little deeper into the heart of Buddhist tradition, not just as philosophy, but as a way of understanding life and ourselves. Today's episode is a very special one. I'm truly honored to be joined by Dr. John Whitney Pettit. Dr. John is a respected scholar and a practitioner of Buddhism, who has spent many years researching, studying, and teaching the philosophical and contemplative tradition of Himalayan Buddhism. His work helps bring ancient teaching into a form that we can understand and connect with today. In this conversation, we'll explore some of the core ideas of Buddhism, along with the stories, insights, and perspectives that often remains less talked about. So, Dr. John, it's a true pleasure to have you with us. So, thank you for coming to the podcast.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah. How are you busy nowadays?
Well, I'm busy in Nepal trying to put my feet on the ground more solidly by working here, by engaging in meaningful work, and hopefully, if at all possible, gainful employment, which is difficult for foreigners, as it is also difficult for Nepali people themselves. So I don't expect very much in the way of reward, but I'm trying to basically, I'm trying to find something more like a regular engagement, at the level of work, service, and participation, some combination of that.
Yeah, that's great. And you'll be doing the great thing on that. So there's a lot of things to discuss today, and
Sure.
I'm very excited. Let's, I don't know where to start, but I think it will be good to start with the background.
Sure.
So being with, will you briefly share your journey, which inspired you to dedicate your life?
Well,
to the study of
I'll just
Buddhism?
say that, when I was an undergraduate, and, let's say 18, 19 years old, then my interest in Buddhism was already very strong. And so starting with my freshman year in college, I was able to take courses related to Buddhism or about Buddhism, different aspects of Buddhism, including I had opportunities to study Sanskrit and Tibetan languages, even during my bachelor's degree time. And also I met, when I was an undergraduate, I met some great scholars and also great masters of the Tibetan tradition, and also some really fine academic scholars from India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and so on. So I had really a interesting and rich experience at, between the ages of 18 and 22, studying Buddhism both academically and personally, spiritually.
So where there was a movement where, the Buddhism shifted from an interest into something, deeply personal.
Well, it really shifted from something that was more of an intellectual interest to being more of a deeply personal vocation when I studied the writings of Nagarjuna. I studied the writings of Nagarjuna in a philosophy class, an entire semester dedicated to understanding Nagarjuna. That was in translation. So at that time, the existing translations weren't necessarily as good as the ones that we have now. But that class convinced me that I needed to learn Sanskrit and also needed to learn Tibetan language in order to really understand Buddhist philosophy. So it was Nagarjuna and Madhyamika philosophy which hooked me in initially.
Interesting about, you talked about the Nagarjuna philosophy. So how can we understand Nagarjuna as a
philosopher?
philosopher?
Well, I would say, to understand Nagarjuna the philosopher, it's best to approach him first as, and this is not the way I learned Nagarjuna, but I think, I know a little more about Nagarjuna's writings now than I did then. I would say don't necessarily approach him first as a philosopher. Approach him as a spiritual friend, as a Kalyana Mitra. And his famous writing called Letter to a Friend, this has been translated several times. The Sudrileka in Sanskrit. This has been translated from Tibetan version into English several times. And it's one example of his letters or epistles, as they call them. Leka means just a written message, which he sent to kings, to rajas, to princes, who sought his advice on how to be a good king. How to be a Buddhist king and how to be a balanced king. And, in the course of teaching his several of his royal acquaintances how to be a good person and also rule a country, he gives a lot of good advice for people about how to rule your own life and how to train your own mind. Anybody can follow this instruction. So based on that, then you can approach the idea of emptiness or Madhyamika philosophy. Can be approached on the basis of understanding Buddhist ethics and everyday Buddhist practice.
Is it vast to understand the emptiness, or?
Well, emptiness is considered a vast subject. That means that, from the rational and analytical point of view, there are many, many ways that you can approach an understanding or master the understanding of emptiness, just from the intellectual, logical, rational perspective. But to fully experience it, you also have to approach your life from the point of view of karma and responsibility for yourself and responsibility for other sentient beings. That is to say, bodhicitta or altruism, the altruism of a bodhisattva. So the two of these have to go together, the rational approach and also the heart-centered or altruistic approach.
So while in the conversation, we came into very complex topics. So I think for many people, Buddhism can feel very complex. So I want to know more about the Sutra, the Vinaya, and Abhidharma, and their different purpose, so that we can.
Well, the sutras of the Buddha are the Buddha's discourses. That means whatever the Buddha's followers could remember of his teachings, as much as possible verbatim, or at least the gist of the various teachings that the Buddha gave. He didn't usually accept to teach formally on a particular topic, except maybe on some very important occasions. He would give a longer discourse, a more thorough and exhaustive exploration of a particular subject to address a large need, or a need that was shared by many different people. Thus, one type of sutras that the Buddha taught. These are the longer discourses found in, for example, the Dirgha Nikaya, a collection of long discourses, or long collection of discourses. But then also, in other places like the so-called Khuddha Nikaya, or the short or tangential collection of discourses, the Buddha taught many, many different subjects just in response to situations that arose, or particular questions by particular people. So as the need arose, the Buddha also taught in very short chunks of information, short discourses. And then in between the long and the short, there are the medium-length discourses, so-called Majjhima Nikaya. These are all found in the Sutra Pitaka, or the collection of the sutras. So these discourses, many, but not necessarily all of them, were spontaneously given. Others may have been better organized or better anticipated by the Buddha and his own disciples, in a particular place for a particular audience. So, Lord Buddha, please, would you give a longer explanation to the people of this place, or the people of this town, because they have this misunderstanding, or they have this need. So basically, the Buddha's sutras are, whatever people can remember of what he taught extemporaneously on the spur of the moment, or what he taught by way of a more formal and premeditated discourse.
So, what about the Vinaya and the Abhidharma?
Well, the Vinaya is what he taught for the monks. So those who accepted to become bhikshus, or members of his order of renunciates, he taught the various rules of the Vinaya. So the Vinaya mostly governs the behavior of monks or nuns, and also the distinction between a novice monk, probationary monk, and fully ordained monk. So, or nun. So novitiates, or novices, beginners, those who are past the beginning level and are now being observed to see if they can hold all of the vows properly. And then finally, those who are ordained with the complete set of vows.
Abhidharma,
Abhidharma is like the extraction of the teaching of the sutras, and also it's the underlying rationale for the Vinaya, or the teaching on ethics and renunciate conduct. So Abhidharma is formal analysis, you can say, a kind of psychological breakdown of the 5 skandhas, or khandhas, the aggregates of a sentient being, as well as the 12 links of dependent origination, which govern the functioning of karma in past and present and future lives, and also the constituents of the universe itself, the animate universe, the inanimate universe, and the universe which is somewhere in between being alive and dead. So all aspects of objective reality are also covered in the categories of the Abhidharma.
So here comes a question, and I was told to ask by my friends, if someone today only followed one part of the Tripitaka, what would they miss?
It depends on which part they follow.
If they are in Sutra, and then they miss the whole objective of Vinaya and Abhidharma.
If someone were only to follow the teachings of the sutras, someone who was studious, intelligent, and also maybe also had like a meditation teacher, then they really wouldn't need to study anything else. In the sutras, all of the parameters for proper conduct, the Eightfold Noble Path, which includes the Samyak Samjivana, for example, right livelihood, and I forget what the word for right conduct or right ethics is, but whatever the words are, the idea is the same. How to behave yourself, how to restrain and discipline your own mind and body and speech. All of these are taught within the Eightfold Noble Path. The Eightfold Noble Path is taught in the sutras, in some places explicitly as eightfold, and other places without explicit reference to the so-called Eightfold Noble Path. But essentially, what the sutras teach all relate to one of those 8 branches of the so-called Eightfold Noble Path, or 8-branch Noble Path. So if you only studied the sutras, you really wouldn't miss anything that you needed to know as a Buddhist practitioner or as a meditator. But if you're the kind of person that can't find the focus and the discipline necessary to reach nirvana in one life without also wearing the robes and holding all the vows of a monastic or formal renunciate, then you would need Vinaya. But not everyone needs Vinaya to be successful in Buddhism. So the sutras really contain, you can say, the most direct experiential introduction to Buddhism. And for some people, that is enough.
Very interesting. So now I just want to come to the Mahayana part, the compassion and expansion.
Okay.
So I just wanted to know the difference, the Theravada, Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. In Mahayana, we usually talk about the Bodhisattva and the compassion. So how can we understand Mahayana?
I think Mahayana represents the efflorescence or the flowering, the ripening of the early Buddhist teachings when they merged and formed kind of a synergistic energy pattern with the existing culture of ancient India, which was a very high level of culture, especially in the Mauryan Empire and in Bihar and other parts of northern India. This was, a cultural apex in the history of India, of ancient India. So the Buddha came at a very opportune moment when the populace was affluent, when there were many educated people, and also, especially, during the Mauryan Empire, the conditions were peaceful. So there was the right level of affluence and the right level of culture for Buddhism, not only to take root, but then to develop its own expression, its own style, as a kind of slow development or accretion of different practices and different points of view. Sometimes that meant the community fragmented and people disagreed vehemently over the interpretation of Vinaya or over the interpretation of Abhidharma, for example. The interpretation of the sutras was not so much of an issue, but when it came to monastic discipline as well as the technical analysis of Buddhism in Abhidharma, the early Buddhists disagreed with each other quite a lot. And eventually, Mahayana arose after a century or two of this kind of disagreement. So this is according to Western scholars using the techniques of text critical research and historiography. So looking at Mahayana as an historical trend, it represents a lot of creative input from some very brilliant people. Now, from the Mahayana point of view, those very brilliant people would be called bodhisattvas. They could have been pandits. They may have been, acharyas. Some of them may have been educated yogis. Those who were fluent in Sanskrit, who also know the Sanatana Dharma very well, and so on. So Buddhism gradually developed its own version of mythology. Instead of the Puranas, we have some of the so-called Vaipulya sutras of Mahayana, which contain a tremendous amount of mythology and spectacular storytelling, which explains the origin of different bodhisattvas and also the origin of different Mahayana doctrines. So Mahayana is early Buddhism, but expanded philosophically and imaginatively through a philosophical analysis on the one hand, and also the development of mythology and legend.
That's pretty interesting. So is enlightenment in Mahayana about personal liberation, or it's a collective awakening?
Well, yes, in Mahayana, enlightenment is definitely collective. Enlightenment is not understood only as a personal thing. The Bodhisattva's enlightenment is indivisible from the enlightenment of other sentient beings. So a Bodhisattva isn't, a Bodhisattva can make any choice they want in terms of their own lifestyle. They could live a renunciate lifestyle, or they could plunge into society and plunge into worldly life. Sometimes it's better to participate in the world that other people live in, as opposed to renouncing and going into the mountains and meditating in solitude for many, many years. When I was younger, that's what I wanted to do. But now, at this point in my life, that doesn't seem like much fun to be apart from other people. I'd rather suffer with everyone else than be comfortable all by myself in a lonely place. So I think it depends a lot on personality, really. What distinguishes a so-called bodhisattva from an arhat? It probably not very much distinguishes them. But a bodhisattva, let's say, is either more reckless or more brave, or maybe some combination of those two. Because the bodhisattva is willing to live in samsara, is willing to take the risk of suffering and misfortune in order to help others.
So for the today's generation, constantly, dealing with the anxiety and depressions and even the identity crisis, and how relevant is the bodhisattva ideal for them?
I think the bodhisattva ideal is relevant, but more relevant than this is the so-called lojong, in Tibetan they call lojong, or training the mind. Training the mind to be able to find peace and contentment even within very difficult situations, and also to generate bodhicitta, which is a pretty advanced subject in Mahayana, but there are certain ways, certain teachings and experiential guidance that one can receive from gurus on how to develop bodhicitta. This also, the development of bodhicitta is described very much in the Mahayana Sutras in different places. It's something every bodhisattva will have to do at some point. Instead of being a bodhisattva only by way of lip service, to really being a functioning, active, committed bodhisattva means you have to develop compassion.
Bodhisattva in action.
Yeah, but to become a bodhisattva in action, you have to take your compassion to an emotional crescendo, and then from that into activity in your life.
Now we come to the very mystical and mystery, Vajrayana. We often describe this as a secret and accelerated path, shortest path for the enlightenment. So why is it called so secret?
Well, there are many different reasons, but the one correction that many Tibetan gurus will give, and I agree with them when they give this correction, is that one shouldn't think it's secret because there's something to hide there. The problem with Vajrayana is that it's basically a highly symbolic system of meditation, but also the system of meditation becomes the framework for interpreting your life experience. And so at the beginner's level of Vajrayana, you're basically forming a new way of seeing yourself and seeing the world. And in that new way of seeing, the world is already a Buddha field. It's already a... what is the word in Sanskrit? Swarg. It's a heaven, type of heaven, or type of divine place. Like, for example, this Kathmandu Valley, the Nepal mandal, it's not an ordinary place. It has so many temples, so many gods. It's not just a human city. It's also a city of gods and a city of bhoots, a city of demons and dakinis, and everything is here, And so, and the Vajrayana idea is that actually the whole world is like that. Not the whole world is as holy as this place, but basically the whole world has human beings and non-human beings. And as much as there are sentient beings in the world, there are also Buddhas everywhere. So Buddha is everywhere and Buddha's activity is everywhere. Vajrayana is a way to see that that is actually the case. It's already the case. It's already true. We have to train ourselves to be able to experience it that way. And once we have experienced it fully, then enlightenment is on the other side of that experience. It ceases to be an experience. It becomes just a basic reality that was never anything else. It was always just the way it is.
This is why it is different from other Buddhism paths.
Well, it's the Mahayana and Theravada, or some kind, they say Hinayana, but basically the vehicle of the Shravakas, the listeners of the teaching, the Pratyeka Buddhas, the ones who realize enlightenment independently, and also the vehicle of Bodhisattvas. These three vehicles are called the vehicle of logical reasons, or the vehicle of spiritual discipline. So according to the vehicle of spiritual discipline, everything is incremental. You start as a sentient being and you slowly purify yourself until you can become an Arya Pudgala, or sublime being. That means a partially enlightened being. And then once you're a partially enlightened being, you can go all the way to enlightenment through cause and effect. So whereas the Vajrayana is based on the view that actually everything is already a Buddha mandala or a Buddha kshetra, and all sentient beings are already actually have complete and perfect Buddhahood inside somewhere, at some layer. Just through obscuration and mistaken identity, we believe that we are sentient beings. So Vajrayana says that, this idea of going from point A to point B through a series of steps is just an exercise, really. What you realize at the end is that you never really even needed the exercise.
Why is the visualization in Vajrayana? What is the deeper purpose for that?
Well, the real purpose, again, is to train oneself to be able to see things the way they really are. So I'm trying to think of here's an analogy. If you're an expert archer, expert at archery, there are many techniques you can use to try to hit the bullseye every time. You may have to visualize something, or you may have to say a mantra, or you might have to hold your breath a certain way. Every person who is a good shot with an arrow has a different way of mastering their ability. But once a person has mastered their ability and the time comes to actually go into battle, they will never have to think for a second about how they fire an arrow. They will be able to use the arrow, and most times they will hit. They won't die. They will be victorious because they already had such a long-standing habit. So, the way it works basically is this. You train yourself so that when the time comes that you really, really need those teachings, you have them. You don't have to think about them. They work for you automatically. It's when you don't need them that it's hard sometimes to keep practicing. I mean, the performance of a gymnast at the Olympics, for example, a tremendous amount of discipline and a lot of mistakes and a lot of failures could lead up to getting a gold medal or scoring a perfect 10. But once that gymnast scores that perfect 10, the usual concept of effort is no longer present. Someone who can have a perfect score in gymnastics or can set a new record in an athletic event is already so highly trained that they don't have to think about effort. They only have to follow whatever the secret inner experience of mastery is for them. And that's something that tends to go beyond effort. It's almost like beyond individual choice. Athletes call it the zone. High-performing individuals know this as the so-called zone, right?
Zone, yeah.
So extensive training and experience can lead to this zone. And that's the zone where the bodhisattvas have to live, actually.
Wow, that's different. That's why Vajrayana have a different...
But Vajrayana is all about getting into the zone. Getting into the zone, but doing it faster and doing it more powerfully than regular techniques. It's... but the more powerful the technique, also, the more danger that it could malfunction, because, the techniques of Vajrayana are actually not easy. They're actually really tough. But if they do work well, then they work extremely well. They work very fast.
Oh. So when we talk about Vajrayana, we also the roles of Guru Padmasambhava comes as well, and we know that the Termas that were hidden, and a lot of siddhas come and they explore the Termas. I just want to know about this. So what is actually the Termas? And
well, I think that Terma or treasure, the idea of Dharma treasure, this is not new in the history of the Nyingma tradition. These kinds of teachings existed before, but not necessarily coming directly from Padmasambhava. According to the legends, or oral traditions, and also sutras and shastras of Mahayana that were translated into Tibetan. The Prajnaparamita, or Perfect Wisdom Sutras, came from the land of the Nagas, from under the ocean. And the story goes that the Lord Buddha gave these teachings of perfect wisdom, but that very few people were able to hear them at that time. So what happened was that the Nagas took the transcript of those teachings and hid them under the ocean in their own place. And then later Nagarjuna, the Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, a couple of hundred years after the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, Nagarjuna was born, and he became aware that the Prajnaparamita teachings, the full set of those teachings, at least, were already available, but he would have to fetch them from the Naga realm. So supposedly he propitiated the Nagas, and they invited him to visit their place, and then gave him these texts, and then Nagarjuna retrieved them to the human world and propagated them.
So it is only for the chosen one to explore that.
Well, I don't know what the legend says exactly about Nagarjuna personally, but at that time he was the right person to do that. It could have been anybody. The point was that the teachings were given at a different time, historically, when it wasn't quite time for those teachings to be widely propagated. Only a limited number of bodhisattvas, as well as many devatas, could hear the Prajnaparamita the first time, or the first time they were taught was during the lifetime of Lord Buddha. And then later these teachings were not widely propagated. They were maybe they were still present in the human realm, but only in a kernel form, or in a very succinct, short form. Nagarjuna retrieved those teachings, it is said, from the Naga realm, and then propagated them in the human realm. So similarly, Guru Padmasambhava gave many teachings, Vajrayana teachings mostly, and these were in some cases written down verbatim in Tibetan, or sometimes in the script representing an Indic dialect that the Guru Rinpoche used to teach them, or they were also sometimes encoded into symbolic script, what people nowadays call sigils. Sigils are bits and pieces of different letters combining into one letter that contains a vast amount of information. So a single symbol can contain a vast amount of information about Dharma. And so in the form of these symbolic letters, so-called, these were written down onto strips of yellow paper, usually yellow-colored paper, and then those were rolled up and then sealed inside of containers of various kinds. And then the direct disciple of Guru Padmasambhava, Yeshe Tsogyal, as well as some one or two other important disciples of Guru Padmasambhava who had great cities, could control the earth element. They buried these inside the earth. So inside of rock, under the ground. Sometimes they concealed them inside of the elements of different architectural monuments, the pillars of temples, the walls of temples, under the throne on which an important Buddha image sat. Sometimes they were put underneath the throne, inside the throne.
So why were they hidden in that way?
Well, for the same reason that the Prajnaparamita Sutras were not taught openly. They were hidden in the realm of the Nagas at the time of the Buddha. People were not ready for these, didn't have direct need for them.
Who protects them?
It protects the teachings and makes sure that they are available at the right time. So because of the prayers of Guru Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal, and also the direct disciples of Guru Padmasambhava, the reincarnations, the emanations of those beings, Guru Rinpoche and his 25 disciples, they could come back at a later time, and at some point they would have an experience that would alert them, aha, I can retrieve some treasures from this spot. So then they would do the appropriate kind of meditation practice that gives them the power to open the door to pull the teaching out of the ground or out of the side of a rock and so on.
Oh, it looks so mystery.
Well, yes. I mean, this is, it sounds like pure magic, but actually, this kind of revelation has been made so many times. There are many, many stories, and even now, still, from time to time, a new event like this happens.
I heard that Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche also found one of the Termas of Vajrakile.
Yes, and I don't know the exact story of his Vajrakilaya, if it was an earth treasure or some other kind of treasure, but yes, and sometimes treasures are taken literally out of thin air. They say out of space, sometimes out of water, sometimes out of earth.
That's interesting. In Vajrayana, we hear about the three roots, the Lama, the Yidam, and the Dharmapala. So why are this considered so essential in Vajrayana, like the Lamas, the Gurus, and the Yidam and the Dharmapala?
Well, in many of the ancient traditions, the guru is considered actually the only person that you ever need to know is a guru. If you have the right guru and they have a blessing, they can introduce you through some kind of diksha or abhisheka, which means like a formal ceremony, or just through personal instruction. Just through dialogue, they can introduce you to your true nature. So Hindus and Buddhists both believe that sometimes the guru can function like this. So in a way, the guru is the most important person. The guru is the Buddha's substitute. Since the Shakyamuni Buddha it already passed away, and it's not directly manifesting in this world, but he can still take the form, or he can still serve us directly through another human being who is qualified as a guru, someone who has a very high level of experience, a lot of qualities and kindness. So this is the guru really is the substitute for the Buddha.
Okay.
The Yidam or deity practice, which is associated with secret mantra, or Guhya mantra practice. That means when you have a personal deity or devata, then the mantra is precious to you, not to share, or at least not to discuss too openly with others, something that's a little bit private. It's kind of like, you don't, discuss your efforts to make a baby with your wife until she has already been pregnant for about 3 months. Up until that time, you keep it secret, right?
Yeah.
But once she's showing, then you can say, oh, yes, right, okay, she's pregnant. Now there's no way to keep the secret. You know what I mean? Something like that. So similarly with secret mantra, as the Yidam is like the internalized aspect of your guru. But until you start to feel and look like a guru yourself to other people, then you can't really say too much about your practice. You have to keep it secret. But when the Yidam, is the method of making the guru exist inside of yourself, as yourself, that the Yidam is making the guru real in yourself and as yourself. So, and then once the energy of the Yidam, the mantra practice, like it could be Vajrakilaya or it could be Amitabha Buddha, Aryatara. Mahakala is more of a Dharmapala, but also Mahakala could be Yidam also, but usually Mahakala is classed as a Dharmapala. In any case, once you have embodied that kind of energy through your practice, through your meditation, then you can express the activity of that deity. You can become the vehicle for the actions of that deity. So whatever needs to be eliminated or destroyed can be destroyed. Anything that needs to be nurtured and increased can be increased. If war needs to be pacified, it can be pacified through your prayers, through your personal presence even. It's possible like this. That's the element of Dharmapala or Dakini. So the Dharmapalas and Dakinis are the third of the three roots. They're the expression of activity.
So my friends ask me a lot when we hear about the Buddhism. We feel it's even we hear this about the religion, it's a very peace one. So, but the Dharmapala are very wrathful, and why are they wrathful? Why is this so angry? And why do we need Dharmapala? Actually, they ask me like.
There are many reasons, but I'll just give one reason that I think. Hopefully it's not too hard to understand. When you follow the very slow and gradual and safe path of cause and effect, that means according to the conventional Mahayana Buddhism, then, if you make a mistake, you only really fall back about one step at a time. If you make many mistakes, you might fall back 3 or 4 steps at a time. But that's because you're going forward one step at a time. When you're using the methods of Vajrayana, potentially you're going to skip 2 and 3 steps at a time. Like, an ultra athlete who can run up 10,000 steps going 3 steps at a time. Someone who's in super good shape can advance very quickly. But if you don't slow down and take a rest often enough, you might slip and fall 5,000 feet off the side of a mountain. It could happen like this. If you're a very, very good athlete, you're running very quickly up the mountain. But if you even get distracted or overtired, or your mind ceases to be alert enough, it's possible you could slip and fall, and it could kill you, or it could harm you like this. And spiritual practice is like that too, not just Vajrayana practice, but any spiritual practice. If you push yourself too hard and you don't have a guide, you don't have a proper teacher, or you don't have the proper experience, you don't have the proper background, then it's possible to crash and burn in your spiritual practice. I mean, many people have done this in every tradition. It's not only Vajrayana. So, Vajrayana is supposed to be a more powerful technique. And what was your question exactly?
Why are they so wrathful?
Well, that's why the Dharmapalas exist, because the Dharmapalas are they are also enlightened beings. Most of them are enlightened, or at least a lot smarter and a lot older than us. Even if they're not fully enlightened, they've been around much longer than any of us have been around in this particular incarnation. They hundreds or thousands of, or even millions of years old. And so their job is to look after people who are on the path. And they can see if somebody is headed for a crash, or a big mistake, or a big failure in terms of their motivation, in terms of their personal conduct, or just in terms of their mindfulness and awareness. Any deficiency in those departments could be damaging to the individual, or even damaging to the community. So Dharmapalas watch out, and they correct us, like Christians believe in angels, I hit myself on my thumb while I was thinking a bad thought about my neighbor. And then the Christian might say, oh, well, God was protecting me, or my patron saint was protecting me. So it's the same idea with Dharmapalas. They protect you. They'll make you smash your finger with a hammer. If they couldn't get your attention in a nicer way, they will make you do that.
So you talked about Dakini. What's really the role of feminine energy in the Vajrayana?
Well, yes, that the Dakini is perfect wisdom, actually, or Prajnaparamita. And Prajnaparamita also is the same as your own Buddha nature, inside. So the Dakini could manifest on any level. It could manifest as your own meditation state. It manifests as your own inner realization. That's the secret or inner Dakini. And the outer Dakini can manifest as a human being, as a goddess, or as a dog, even, or as an animal. It could manifest in many different ways. It could manifest as the weather, as water, as fire, air, and so on. So the Dakini, the idea of Dakini refers, I would say, primarily to Mother Nature, right? But also refers to your true nature. So the external Dakini shows up, through Mother Nature, or also as images of goddesses, or even as your own wife or partner, or even your dog, like that it could be. So
all the female deities, like Tara and Kurikule, are they Dakinis as well?
In a way, there's nothing that isn't some type of Dakini. Dakini could mean anything that manifests naturally in the environment. That means there could be Dakinis that represent the most aggressive and conflicted type of nature. When those Dakinis manifest, it could be in the form of landslide, floods, bad weather, epidemics, and so on. These are sometimes considered to be the sign of the Dakinis. Well, in this case, the Dakinis are corresponding with the natural elements. When the elements of nature are disturbed or out of balance, then you have, excessive rain, drought, fire, earthquake, epidemic, and this kind of thing.
We call in Nepal, in Neva community, we call them Azima.
Azima.
So is there a link between Dakini and
Azima? The Azima is a particular type of Dakini. This kind of Dakini exists in very close connection with human beings as well as nature, with human society, and also the natural hierarchy of nature, which includes animals and the landscape and the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. Right. So the Ajimas are very connected with the world that we live in, but the world that they live in is also their world. We don't live in that world necessarily, but we intersect with that world. This kind of Dakini is sometimes these are called they're called Ajima or Matrika which means they are like the mothers of living beings. The matrikas regard human beings and animals and so on as similar to their own children.
So Ashtamatrika we talk about, they are in the matrikas.
Yes, Ashtamatrika are the 8 you can say mother goddesses or motherly goddesses. Yeah.
So talking about all the mystery, I want to talk about the main very talked about and very mystery about the Shambhala. So,
Shambhala.
yeah. So the idea of Shambhala is very fascinating, first of all. So what is it this hidden spiritual kingdom, or how can we see Shambhala as?
Well, I don't know the answer to this on the basis of my direct experience, and I'm also not really an expert as a scholar in regard to this. But I can tell you what I know that some great masters have said about Shambhala, starting, for example, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He has said at different times and in different places, in response to this question, where is Shambhala? What is Shambhala? He has said, Shambhala is definitely a real place. It exists. He has said that it actually exists here on our planet. It's hidden from view, it's disguised. It's a crypto kingdom or crypto continent that exists on planet Earth, but we can't see it because magic has hidden it. It's a virtual reality that's concealed, but real enough. That's basically what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said. Another time he said it's real, but it's on a different planet. Some might even think it's on the planet Mars, but I don't know if His Holiness the Dalai Lama ever said it was on Mars. But it could be a different planet, one that's very similar to ours, where the human beings there have a culture and an appearance very similar to ours, and they practice Vajrayana Buddhism as well as a variety of other religions, including Islam and Christianity and so on. And all of these are part of the Shambhala kingdom. The difference being that Shambhala kingdom has a king, and also the Dharma, the Sanatana Dharma and the Buddha Dharma together, more or less govern the laws and the customs of that kingdom. So it's a very peaceful place where war and social conflict in the usual sense simply don't exist. People get along, and everybody follows the law, and the law is laid down by basically in terms of Buddhism. So this is the external idea of Shambhala. The inner or symbolic meaning of Shambhala as it relates to our world and our history is connected to the outer Shambhala, but also related to a more inner version of Shambhala, which basically the kingdom of Shambhala is here. The warriors of Shambhala and the citizens of Shambhala are us. Those of us who follow Dharma, those of us who, uphold peace, and also those of us who are, have warrior qualities. That means we're willing to fight for what we believe in, and we're willing to be strong and to put up with a lot of discomfort and a lot of unpleasant challenges in order to hold on to that law, in order to hold on to that peace. Those are the warriors of Shambhala in this world. So, individuals like ourselves here, we don't go around bragging that we're like famous, great warriors or anything, but to be spiritually courageous, and to hold on to very high ideals, and also to be a decent human being in spite of a lot of suffering, in spite of a lot of betrayals, a lot of setbacks and frustrations in life. All of these are, you can say, the boot camp or the basic training of spiritual warriorship. And that's another aspect of Shambhala that is many people relate to this idea of Shambhala nowadays. It's a powerful concept.
That's so interesting. I have heard that there's something, with the Purva of the Vajrakile and the Shambhala. Is there any relation with that?
Oh, I don't know specifically, but the Purva is a very widespread old symbol. The dagger or the spike. The spike could be used as a weapon, to puncture somebody or something, but also it could be used to hold something down. Like, for example, to hold your own shield or discipline, your own ethics, or to ground your own energy, which in Sanskrit is virya. Your own energy and your own discipline can be held down with the Purva. The Purva stands for that kind of idea.
So we are at the last of our podcast. So But there's really something that I really want to ask is the mindfulness, which is the buzzword now. So mindfulness has become very popular worldwide. But how is it? Like the modern mindfulness, and is it different from the mindfulness that was taught by the Buddha?
I don't think so. I think that the context of the teaching has shifted. That the teaching of mindfulness, which in Pali it's satipatthana. Satipatthana means foundation of mindfulness. So sati or smriti in Sanskrit means awareness, mindfulness. Patthana means focusing, right? So the basic focus of mindfulness, body and speech, mind, sensations, as well as feelings and phenomena, generally external phenomena. These are those encompass the so-called four foundations of mindfulness. These have never changed. They will never change, because we're just human. There's only so much you can look at in the human body, speech, and mind process, right? So whatever makes you human, whatever makes you alive, that's what you're observing with mindfulness. In mindfulness. So I don't think it's changed, but now people are doing it for other reasons besides just enlightenment. People are doing it also to become more focused, more effective. I don't know if it really works that way, but the basic practice hasn't changed.
So before going, so for young and very curious for who are coming for the Buddhism, but don't know where to start, for the young youths, what do you recommend the first step?
Well, if you like to do fun things and to hike and go on outings, I would say go and visit some of the holy. If you're in Nepal, if you're a Nepali or living around Kathmandu, go to visit some of the famous chaichas. Like Bodha or Kasti Mahachaicha is a very popular one for many tourists, but there are others too. There's Charamati at Chabil, and there's the three other Ashoka era stupas in Lalitpur or Kathmandu, but I think at least two of them are in Lalitpur now. So these are very ancient places, and just to do one circle of these places and asking for guidance, asking for connection, would probably make it. I mean, it means that the person who does that with just a little bit of faith will probably find the answer to their question, how do I practice Buddhism? Or they will just stumble on the answer. I advise doing this because I've done it myself. When I wasn't sure what to do next, I've gone to Bodha and done 3 quarter or 10 quarter, whatever, even just one, and lighting one candle and asking for help. What do I do next? What am I supposed to do now? I've had better luck after that. Less confusion and more confidence. So if it works for me, I think it also should work for a beginner. These are very basic gestures of faith. So if you have even just a little faith in Buddhism, or even just a curiosity, then somehow the answer could come. That's one thing I could say for sure.
So is there a role of karma here? Is there a role of karma, even getting into this Buddhism and spirituality, or the karma plays a role here? Even when you go to as you said, go to a specific place, to Kora, does past karma, does that guide you for the spirituality further?
Well, I think it guides all of us, for better or for worse. If our karma is, as much as it's good, it will guide us in the right way. If our previous karma is mixed, sometimes we might be guided in the right way, other times we might be misguided.
Oh, so.
But I think, another consideration is this, we live in the Kali Yuga. Right now, the function of karma is much accelerated. This is because of the condition of the planet, the stars, the astrology, the affect of astrology. According, for example, to the Kala Chakra Tantra, in the different ages, the Krita Yuga, the Dvapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Kali Yuga. These 4 yugas, in the Krita Yuga time, the karma ripens very slowly. So if I murder somebody in this lifetime, maybe I won't have to experience any negative result for many lifetimes. I might get away with murder for many lifetimes, but eventually I have to suffer for that negative action. In this yuga, the likelihood of, if you could do something negative, especially if already you're a practitioner, if you took refuge in the triple gem, the Trisharana, if you do something, even a small thing, the effect can come back to you like that. So I think we should consider now that cyclical time is on a very tight loop for us now, and especially for Dharma practitioners, and especially for Vajrayana practitioners. There's no time to waste, and also there's no getting away with anything anymore. Everything is going to come back to us very rapidly. The more we practice, and the more deep and powerful the practice that we're doing, like mantra practice, for example, means that the result of karma is coming around much more quickly. So I think karma is always active. But at this time, I think, especially for Vajrayana practitioners, we can assume that everything is coming back to us, and not next life, this life even. The result is coming back. If it's the result of good practice, the result is enlightenment. The result is freedom, and the result is joy, happiness, for ourselves and for others. That's the result. And if we make a little bit of mistake, we'll get slapped in the face, and then we just keep going and do things the right way after that.
So yeah, it was a very good experience, having having you here in the podcast.
Thank you.
We have learned a very insightful things and very new things as well.
I hope that everyone who has the time to see this interview, I hope that they find some inspiration and encouragement. And I pray that everyone here, especially here who hears this, in Nepal or elsewhere, that everyone who hears any of this can reach Buddhahood very quickly. I pray for that.
Yeah, we pray for that as well. Thank you. So for listening more insightful videos, do like and subscribe. Thank you.